Well, I didn't always like building things. A couple of years ago, and I've shared this before, I had a little bit of a problem with our air conditioner. It weighs about 10,000 pounds, and I have to get it up into our attic loft, into this really tight space. But hey, problems that gives opportunities for creativity. So I ended up building a box out of plywood. I bought some plywood. I did the measurements, things like that. This was kind of out of my wheelhouse, but I had fun doing it. I ended up building this perfectly shaped box that just fit around my air conditioner unit so that I could haul it up with a winch, an electric winch. And it was great. I had a great time doing it. Who would have known that here I am, this budding carpenter, and the box, it was perfect. It was beautiful. It was everything went great until it broke. But I fixed it, and I got metal brackets, and I made it better. So it was perfect plus, even better. What about you? Are there some things there's something that you like to just get your hands on that grounds you in this world that we live in that seems to be so intangible at times? Do you like to get your hands in the garden, and do you like to see your garden bear fruit at the end of it? How does it feel to put that final stroke of paint on that project that you've been working on for so long? Or to zip that final screw in that carpentry project that you've been planning on and building for forever? It turns out that we were made to make good things. We were made to make good things, and we were made to enjoy the good things that we make. But how do we build? How do we make good things we cannot hold with tools that we cannot see? Well, if you're joining us for the first time, last week we kicked off a new series called Grace and Grit. We're actually taking a break from that today. We'll come back to that next week, but because we're taking a break for fall kickoff, for Vision Sunday. And we've got an exciting ministry year ahead. And Vision Sunday gives us the opportunity to regroup as a church and to prepare ourselves for what God might have in store for us next. But if we're going to build better futures together, how can we know that what we're building is being made with the right kind of materials? And not only that, how can we know that what we're building, how can we know that it's going to last? Well, what we're going to talk about today is important because we are all building things that are more important than boxes, aren't we? You may not fancy yourself to be a builder, but the truth is that you are. If you're a grandparent or if you're a parent, you are building the next generation. If you work from 9 to 5 or if you go to school, you are shaping the lives of those next to you, whether you realize it or not. In all of your groups and all of the connections that you have, you are building something into people's lives just by being present with them. Now, if you're like me, there's a part of you that probably says, hey, I didn't sign up for this. And that's true. Nobody did sign up for this. But every person does not simply occupy the space that they live in. They change the space that they live in by simply occupying it. So, how do we make use of the space that we're in to build something beautiful? How can we lay hands on the best tools to make something good? How do we build strong families, friendships, communities, and churches when we're building things that we can't always see with tools that we can't always touch? Well, that's the question that I want to explore with you today. And we're actually going to go back to an ancient letter, another one of the Apostle Paul's letters. Last week we were in the book of Romans, and Today we're going to spend some time in the book of Ephesians. Now, there was a time when Paul, who was a Jew, considered himself somebody who, well, he hated people who were not Jewish. And the term for non-Jews in the scriptures, that's Gentiles, the Gentiles. But after an encounter, a vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus, Paul, he was changed. Not only was he changed, he was given a commission through that vision to be an apostle to the Gentiles, the very people that he hated. And against all odds, it worked. He was sent from Israel throughout the known world at the time. He was sent to Asia Minor, which is now Turkey, and in Greece. And all of a sudden, these little communities of Gentiles who were following Jesus started to spring up and pop up all over the known world at the time. Against all odds, it worked. Now, we don't know a whole lot about the church in Ephesus. In this letter, there are actually really no personal details that are included about the church, which makes it a unique letter among all of Paul's letters. And not only that, at the very beginning, where it says to whom the letter is addressed to God's holy people in Ephesus, well, some of the most ancient manuscripts, they don't even have that phrase at all. It's nothing is there, which has led some scholars to believe that this might have been a circular letter. Have you ever written tons of thank you notes after a wedding or a birthday or a graduation, and all of your words start sounding the same? Well, that's probably a little bit like what Paul is doing here. Not out of tiredness, but out of efficiency, writing something to all of the churches in Asia Minor and putting a different name on each letter. That's probably what was happening here with the book of Ephesians. So in one sense, it's generic. But there's also another sense that this letter is written to some specific needs that Paul saw popping up all over Turkey at the time. These were new communities. They were rough around the edges. You could say that they were kind of like sophomores. You know, sophomores in high school. They've been around the block. They know where the lockers are at. They know which seniors to avoid. And they kind of feel like they know everything. But the truth is they don't. I can still hear my sophomore English teacher saying, you know what the word sophomore means? It's a combination of wise and moron. I still remember him telling us that. So these guys are sophomores. And here's what Paul wants in writing them this letter. He wants them to take the next step. He wants them to thrive. And he's doing that he starts out by reminding them of God's great kindness to them. They were far away, but they have been brought near. He reminds them of where they have been and how far they've come along. And then in the center of this letter, he comes to this really remarkable prayer. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit and in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all of the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and how long and how high and how deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. I pray that you might be strengthened, that you might have power in your inner being, that you might experience this fullness. There's a lot of complex language there, but we can at least get the point that Paul, his prayer, his deepest desire was for this community to be spiritually deepened, to take the next step. The rest of Paul's letter is going to be devoted how to practically do that, some practical things they can live out in order to make that happen. And he starts with a plea for unity. He wants them to stick together, and he reminds them that their faith is a faith of oneness, There's one Lord, one baptism, one Spirit, and there's one community. They're to be one together. Then he goes on and he mentions, look, yeah, there is a diversity. There's a diversity of gifts. There's a diversity of roles and offices in the church. But even that diversity is supposed to come together and serve the oneness of the church so that the entire church might be built up. It might be built up. And there is our key word that goes back to the question we asked at the beginning. How do we build things that we cannot see? Well, Paul's going to answer that in this section that we're going to look at today. But I want to do something different. Before we even get there, I'm going to tell you what Paul's big answer is. His big answer, the big way, his secret weapon of building spiritual community, spiritual relationships, building spiritually into people's lives. And it's simply this. It's simply this. Speaking truth. Speaking truth. But before we go there, let's just take a quick detour just to show you how important this concept is in the rest of Paul's letter. We'll look at a few verses. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are members of one body. Do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. Let no one deceive you with empty words. Be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Pray also for me that whenever I speak, words may be given to me that I will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel. Put off falsehood. Speak truthfully. Let no one deceive you with empty words. Speaking to one another in psalms and spiritual songs and hymns. Pray also for me, Paul says, that words might be given to me and that I might be bold and that I might be fearless. Well, it's going to be a shock to no one to say that truth, it's under assault. It's under assault. And you know what the one thing that people agree with? It's that truth is under assault. It doesn't matter which side you're on. It comes from every side. Some people say that it starts with academia and it works its way down. I can still remember sitting in English classes in college learning about Jacques Derrida and postmodernism and reader response theory. And there are some truths to all of those things. There's also a reality that we can't define truth simply by what we experience. Truth goes beyond what we experience. It's more than that. Today, things are true for many people based on how we feel. Facts are chosen that support what we believe, and full stories are often ignored. I don't know about you, but sometimes I even find myself straw manning other arguments and assuming the worst in people. We exploit ambiguities, and fear is tapped within us for sensationalism so that we might keep our eyes on the screen so that advertisers can make more money. Because we feel threatened, we often dig deeper into the comfort of our worldview. This very letter for me, when I was in seminary, it unlocked something strange. And maybe it'll sound strange for you, but it was the love of being wrong. The love of being wrong. Now I know that that's got to be kind of weird because, like, who loves to find themselves in a debate with somebody online or wherever it's at, and then all of a sudden find out that your facts didn't match up later? Who loves that? And in one sense, I get that. And in one sense, having this posture of defense is important. There's something good. There is also a truth that, it's also true that when we embrace the journey of being wrong, it opens up an opportunity for us to learn and know what's actually right. It creates curiosity in us. It creates an appetite for learning when we embrace being wrong. And Paul, when he starts out in this section, it's no accident that he begins this section that we're going to look at with this expression, be completely humble and gentle. Truth cannot exist properly without humility, because then it just becomes a partisan thing. It's sold to the highest bidder to stir up emotion, eyes, and dollars. But truthfully experienced, it cannot be sold. But it can be discovered when we embrace the possibility of being wrong and get excited about the journey to discover our wrongs so that we can learn and grow and learn and grow. Well, when we experience truth and invite others to experience it, that's when we start to build. But is sharing the truth, is just sharing the truth, is that enough? Is that enough? After reinforcing the importance of building one another up, look at how Paul unpacks the purpose for one's building. Here's what he says. So that, this is the purpose of it, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ. There it is, friends. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that truth is essential for building our lives and building the lives of those around us. And if it's not spoken, then that truth cannot be received. That's important. But Paul is not satisfied with truth delivered alone. That's important. Paul is not satisfied with truth delivered alone. There's a way, there's a manner that truth is supposed to be delivered that makes all the difference. Truth must be spoken with love. Truth must be spoken with love. And now, love is something that we talk a lot about here. Every time we come to it, it feels like we need to unpack it a little bit because it would be way too simple to just say love is love. That's not really a meaningful and thoughtful way to engage what the Apostle Paul meant here with this word that is agape in the original language. A comprehensive look at this word, it teaches us that love does, but love isn't just an action. It's more than that. Genuine love will pour out into action. Genuine love will do things, but it's not as simple as that. Is it an emotion? Well, that probably doesn't quite capture it either. It's not like romance, like being in love with somebody. That's not it. It's not fickle or fleeting. Intimacy, that word is thrown around some, but that's probably a little too strong and leans into the romance side a little bit. But the best attempt to define what this means so that we can understand in a basic sense what Paul is talking about is the word affection. It's the word affection. And that's an inner disposition inside of us of warmth and interest toward someone else. It puts color to our actions. It gives common practices life. It makes them come alive. And speaking the truth with it is the key ingredient to make that truth come alive in someone's life. In fact, in the original language, it appears that it is a condition that has to be met in order for truth to set in someone's heart. It has to be met for people to grow into Christ, Remember that call that I put forward at the beginning, this desire to be better families, be better friends, to be better communities, to be better churches? Well, what better target would we have in our lives than to be like the one who is completely loving, to be like the one who is completely humble, to be selfless, full of joy, rich in peace, generous, kind, self-controlled. And who better modeled that than Christ? Well, one of our favorite toys at the Nuxel house is magnetic tiles. And part of the reason for that is that when the kids go to bed, Amy and I play with them. I just love what you can build with these things. We'll sometimes get down with the kids and we'll build these complex structures with, we'll make slides and we'll use ball pit balls and we'll drop it in one corner and watch the ball just kind of bounce around and find its way out the other side. Or one of Dad's favorite things to do is to see if we can build the tallest tower in the world. So we go way up to our vaulted ceiling. I get the ladder out. Mom is nervous over on the side as I haul kids up on the ladder and they put up the pieces. But I have some really great pictures. It's fun to come upstairs and to see some of the things that they build. They build giant castles, apartments, skyscrapers. It's really cool, the stuff that they are constructing with this stuff. But when I think about these blocks, I think about some of the truth blocks that we can build into somebody's life, kind of as a way of illustration. And I think that, you could say that there are different kinds of truth that we could use to build into someone's life. Like a challenge. Now, challenges are hard. Some of us would prefer not to do them at all, but challenges are important to build into somebody's life, to help them to become the most that they can be. At the same time, the question that I want to ask is, how would affection, genuine affection, affect a challenge? How would it shape it? And that's something that could be answered many ways. What I want to lean into today is just one way. How can affection affect the discerning of our timing when it comes to a challenge? How can it help us discern the right time when to challenge somebody? And I have 3 questions. Well, I'll get to that in a second, but I think a good way to set it up is a well-known comedian actually had some really poignant advice. He learned to ask himself before he said something difficult to somebody 3 questions. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said by me now? And then he said it only took him 3 marriages to figure that out. Well, I think if Paul had a similar set of questions, here's the questions that he might have asked. First, who am I sharing this truth with? Who am I sharing this truth with? And then, how far along are they? How far along are they? And then lastly, what's my relationship with them? What's my relationship with them like? Well, let's start out with the first one. I don't know if you noticed in what we read, but did you notice who Paul is talking to? He's talking to people inside the believing community, and he's telling them to speak the truth in love to those inside the believing community. Insiders. Now, it is good and it is important to discuss our values and share the beauty of this life with those outside of our community in humble, cordial conversation. That's an important thing to do. Paul also knew that you cannot build common expectations off of different values. So very clearly he says to followers of Jesus that If outsiders haven't said yes to Jesus, then we can't expect them to live with the same expectations that we hold of ourselves. It clearly says that in 1 Corinthians 5. Common expectations come from shared values. So the first question that we should ask ourselves is, who am I sharing this with? The second question that we can ask ourselves is, how far along are they? What if somebody has the same values that we have, but they aren't necessarily as far along? In college, I was a resident advisor. I don't know, that's kind of the modern lingo for it, but a dorm supervisor for my dorm community. It was Stout Hall. It was the honors dorm, which didn't exactly have an athletic prowess, as you could imagine. But hey, we all needed to get in shape and stay in shape, so I was required to do a certain number of programs every month, and I came up with the idea of Stout in Shape. And we were going to just get outside and run around the campus and do it once a week for a few weeks and see if it would jumpstart people in a healthy direction. Well, when we went out, it was immediately clear that some were in good condition for this sort of thing, but there was at least one person, I'll call him Jake, who had never really done any running in his life. So you could see right away that the pack was starting to separate. And I had a heart for Jake because I was once in Jake's shoes too, so I decided to hold back and just run with him. Keep pace with him where he was at. Now, what would have happened if I had just run at the front of the pack with everybody and left Jake behind? Or what would have happened if we didn't invite Jake to come at all? Both of those things would have been negative. When we think about the truth that we share, it can be really helpful to first ask ourselves, where is the person at? And I know that we can't always discern that, but if we want to be a part of their journey, if we want to build into their lives, it's going to help us a lot if we meet people where they're at. Because when we meet people where they're at, we all get to move together. We all get to move together. The last question that we could ask when we think about a challenging truth is, what kind of a relationship do I have with this person before sharing? I'll never forget the letter that a mom wrote one of my friends in college. And it was a letter that questioned his decision on an engagement and whether this was the right person that he should be marrying. This mom had concerns. It was a mom in his church. And I knew him personally, and there was some debate about whether the decision was the best decision, and I could understand where the concerns were coming from. But here's the thing. This mom had really no relationship with him whatsoever. No relationship with him. The hard counsel that she gave did not settle in the tilled soil of a trusting relationship. When we have worked alongside people, when we have laughed alongside people, when we have grieved alongside people, celebrated alongside people, we have earned the right, we have earned the opportunity, I should say, to challenge our brothers and sisters to take another step. And we get to lay another block in the space we occupy as builders. Walking with people in every aspect of life gives us the opportunity to build in tough places. To build in tough places. Well, a challenge block, fortunately, isn't the only kind of block that we can build with truth. We can also build with blocks of encouragement or affirmation. But don't be fooled by this, because we can encourage and we can affirm in ways that are also not affectionate. Think about it. Has there ever been a part of you that has maybe shared a kind comment to somebody or shared a positive word, mostly because you wanted to be seen or you wanted to be thought of in a certain way? Flattering might give us some traction in somebody's life, but ultimately it's hollow and it really doesn't mean anything. There's a kind of kindness that has no meaning. There's also an encouragement that cheers on, that hopes for people in hopeless seasons, that sees the best in people, that believes the best in their outcomes, that points people unwaveringly to Jesus all the way. And that's the kind of kindness that means the world to people and builds them up. When we lay these bricks, we have the opportunity to build into people's lives a new reality, a new way of seeing. It's a new way of being. Words have power. People have been changed by words. I've seen people changed by words. But truth with love that builds, but it's truth that love that builds something that lasts. It creates something that endures. It feeds souls, and it helps people reach their full potential. It invites the world to experience something bigger than they can see. The world we build hangs on the affection-filled truth we bring to those around us. So how can affection-filled words, I'll fix that later. How can affection-filled words of truth change your relationship and change your world? How can affection-filled truths build better lives for the people around you? Every 5 years or so, churches like ours, they undergo a process of reevaluating their mission and their vision to try to discern how is God leading the church as a community into the community with the guidance and prayerful direction of Jesus to serve him in thoughtful and meaningful ways. Every 5 years that happens. It's been about 6 years since we've done that at Christ Church. We also still feel like our vision and our mission here at Christ Church is still fresh and it's still meaningful to us today. So we're sticking with it for a little while longer. And our mission is to celebrate people, pursue wholeness, and discover God. It's that first one, celebrate people, that really stands out most of the time. And it's the first word that stands out. It doesn't, here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean to celebrate all things. It means to celebrate those that are created in God's image, which is everybody. Everybody is created in God's image, no matter where they are in the race. By saying celebrate people, we affirm their value and worth in our truth-telling. And it's biblically rooted in our responsibility to bless people as we bless God, which is found in the book of James. You know what I love the most about that statement? I love it because it calls us to something deeper. We could have thrown the word love out there. And as we already kind of talked about, love is generic, and it means a lot of different things, and it's so widely applied that it sometimes doesn't really mean anything at all. It's often used in cliches among Christians, among well-meaning Christians who will say, you love the sinner and hate the sin. That can often feel like we really hate the sinner and hate the sin just because it's become so cliche. But celebrate, and we can love people without affection. I mean, not truly, but we can say that we love people, and we can say it in a way that feels like affection is really absent and not genuine and not real there. But celebrate people is different. It's different because it demands something more of us. Have you ever tried to not just be polite to the opposing team, but to celebrate the opposing team? When you watch the head coach of your favorite team give some coach speak and pay respects to the opposing team, We get that out of respect, and we don't want them to be too angry and beat us, but do they really celebrate the opposing team? Celebrate, it asks more of us. It asks something inside of us to step up, to be bigger. Celebrate requires some affection. Celebrate requires us to find something that we are affectionate about in people. It cannot be faked. It cannot be easily faked, at least. Well, that's going to be ever more important in this world that we live in, because we live in a world that is dividing, and we see hearts that are hardening all around us. But in hard spaces, there is also an amazing opportunity for the church to build something that many are not courageous enough and many are not bold enough to do. If we continue to speak truth, but do so with a genuine and powerful affection. Celebrate people, it pulls that out of us. It calls for a better posture. It gives us tools to build in the great unknown ahead. So as you enter into spaces that God has called you, what will you do? Will you shrink back, holding to the false idea that we can occupy a space without changing it? Or will you embrace the opportunity to build? And will you use the best materials, building words to make something in that space that will last? What could your family look like? What could your school look like? What could your work look like? What could your relationships look like? What could this church look like as we courageously bring affection-filled truth to the table and live by it and drink from that well? Friends, God has made us to make things. God has made us to make beautiful things. Sometimes we don't see those things, and sometimes we can't put our hands on those things, but He has given us a clear direction to make them, to produce something that is better than what the world has to offer, and that can also be a wonderful and powerful gift to this world. Let's enter into that space together. Let's pray.